Hi, good evening. My name is Jenny Stang, and I'm the MSW intern for the center at Shenanigans. And I'm going to do some psychoeducation trainings coming up over the next several weeks. And the first one I'm going to do is suicide prevention education. Now, the reason why I chose to do this topic first is because I speak to a lot of people in the community, particularly youth and parents of youth, and they are concerned about the rising suicide rates amongst children in general, teens in general, but also LGBTQ youth as well, namely trans and non-binary or non-gender conforming youth. And so this presentation today will give you some statistics so you can kind of know the prevalence of suicide or suicidal thoughts or ideation. Also, how you can identify if your child or someone you love and care about is close to you, if they're struggling with depression or suicidal thoughts. And then also, how do you respond if it becomes apparent that your loved one or your child is struggling with some of these more depressive symptoms? And so hopefully you'll never need to use this information, but statistically, there's probably a chance that, a heightened chance that you will if you have a child who is part of the LGBTQ community. So I want to give you a few statistics here first. So suicide overall is the second leading cause of death among young people aged 10 to 14. And that's the third leading cause of death amongst 14 and 25 or 20, sorry, 15 and 24-year olds. And that's a statistic from 2022. The Center of Disease Control and Prevention put that out. But there are other studies that show that in 2024, that number is, the numbers are actually increasing. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning youth are at significantly increased risk than their heteronormative, straight, cisgendered peers. So LGBTQ plus young people are more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide than their peers. So I get a lot of information from the Trevor Project. It is a suicide prevention and education resource for young people in the community. And according to them, they estimate that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ plus young people ages 13 to 24 seriously considered suicide each year in the United States. And at least one will attempt suicide every 45 seconds. So you can see that this is definitely something that we need to be paying attention to. The Trevor Project in 2023, they did a national survey on the mental health of LGBTQ plus young people and found that 41% of them seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including roughly half of transgender and non-binary youth. Okay, so the risk goes up exponentially in that group. 39% of these young people seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including 46% of transgender and non-binary young people. They are reported at a higher rate than their white peers. Sorry, it's by people of color, so that intersectionality, it's higher than their white peers. And 90% of LGBTQ young people said that their well-being was negatively impacted by recent politics. Okay, there's been a lot of legislation, a lot of new rules and things like that coming out that are actively hostile, and our young people are worried about it, right? They're scared. And then last, nearly half, 90 or 49% of LGBTQ plus young people aged 13 to 17 experienced bullying in the past year. And those who did reported significantly higher rates at attempting suicide in the past year than those who did not experience bullying. Okay, so there's a lot of external factors that play a part. And actually, it's all of them are external factors really that play a part in these higher rates of suicide amongst LGBTQ plus young people. So of course, we need to recognize when our loved one needs help, if they're experiencing a mental health crisis. If you're close to them, if you're a guardian or a parent, or if maybe you're a teacher, or even if you know it's an adult and you're close to them, it's good to know what the signs are so that you can intervene and offer your assistance to help them with their well-being. Most of the information I'm going to go over today is going to be centered on youth. However, the warning signs, the risks, all that stuff, they're applicable to adults as well. So what are the signs? So there's going to be several different categories of signs. And you or your loved one may experience all of these. You may experience one or two. But that's when what you're really looking for is a shift in what is normal for that person and how they behave. Okay. So the first one, changes in behavior. Maybe they're becoming more withdrawn, right? They're not going out socializing as much as they used to. They're avoiding social gatherings where there's going to be people. They're avoiding things that they used to enjoy. Now, of course, we know children change um, obsessions pretty quickly. So maybe they're just not into the same stuff anymore, and that's okay. But you'll know, right? If maybe somebody was really, really invested in their volleyball team and now they don't really care, or if somebody was really, really invested in their artwork and now they can't even be bothered by it anymore. And that's abnormal, right? They're not picking up something new. They're just not doing the things that they love anymore. That's when you know that's a warning sign. Maybe there's an increase in irritability. So notice changes in their mood. So maybe they're more easily agitated than they used to be. Maybe they're more irritable than they used to be. Maybe they're always frustrated and they're expressing that frustration. And of course, there may be just times, seasons in our life where we're just going to be grumpy, and that's okay. But you're looking for something that lasts more than 2 weeks, and they can't seem to shake it. Okay, so don't think that every time someone's in a grumpy mood or they're feeling frustrated, oh my gosh, they're suicidal, right? But is it a consistent pattern of behavior for more than 2 weeks? And you can't really get down to the nitty gritty of like, why are they feeling that way? Like maybe are they hangry? Are they tired? Are they not, getting the exercise that they need? That could be a risk factor. Okay. So next, here's some physical symptoms. There's going to be changes in sleep patterns. Okay. So that could be insomnia, or that could be excessive sleeping. It could be maybe having more nightmares, or maybe they sleep for a long time and they still are never feeling rested. Right. Now, again, you're looking for a change in what's normal. So each person is going to need a different amount of sleep. So my children, they probably can't function off of less than 10 hours of sleep. And so if they're sleeping 10, 12 hours a day, that to me is not a warning sign because that's normal for them. But I do know when they are having insomnia, right? When they're getting 6 hours or less of sleep and they can't sleep, or they're falling asleep but not staying asleep. That's when I know that change in sleep pattern is a cue for me to check in and see how they're doing. And then again, changes in appetite. So that could be significant weight loss. That could be significant weight gain for no apparent reason. Okay. Sometimes people use food to cope, and it could be you stress eat, right? But some people stress starve, right? So I'm one of those people where if I'm stressed out, it's very difficult for me to eat. However, my husband's the opposite. So when he's stressed out, he craves the sugar and the carbs. So again, you're looking for what's different, what's changed from what you're normally seeing from this person. Next one, emotional changes. So persistent sadness, right? Maybe they're constantly feeling sad or appearing sad or teary-eyed. Maybe they're expressing to you that they feel hopeless, right? And again, we all have periods where we're feeling down, especially if we are paying any attention to the world around us. There's plenty of reasons to be upset and be sad. But again, this is going to be something that they cannot shake. You cannot see a shift in this. It's getting worse, and it's lasting for 2 weeks or longer. And then an unexplained mood swings, so extreme highs and lows, right? And that maybe then those are out of character, right? Some of us are just kind of that way and we have highs and lows, and that's normal for us, and it's not a warning sign of suicide. But for those who are not in that way, that go up and down often, and it's definitely out of character for them, that might be an indication that you need to check in and see how they're doing, okay? And a note on that wording up there where they said expressing feelings of hopelessness. So statistically, survivors of suicide, they say that that is the number one feeling that they feel prior to committing suicide, is that idea that nothing's ever going to get better. This is never going to change. I'm trapped in this situation. That hopelessness is a very strong indicator that you need to have a deeper conversation with somebody and see what's really going on in their head. Okay. Next, maybe they're starting to neglect their responsibilities. So that could be a decline in their work performance or academic performance. Maybe they're, doing pretty good in school, and then all of a sudden it just took a nosedive, and you don't know why, right? Maybe they weren't sick, they didn't miss any days of school, right? Or even if it's an adult loved one, or maybe if it's even yourself, right, where you're just having a really hard time getting the gas in your car, so to speak, to get what you need to get done. It's a struggle for you. That might be a sign that you need to reach out and see if there's somebody there that can support you. And I'm pretty sure there's always going to be somebody who can support you. If not, I can give you some resources at the end of this. Um, next one is a next sign is a neglect in personal hygiene. So of course we all have those days where we're not going to be, scrubbing everything down every day, and that's fine. But if it becomes again a pattern over 2 weeks or longer, there's a noticeable decline in those self-care habits or those grooming habits, right? Maybe they're not eating well anymore. They're not sleeping well anymore. They can't be bothered to shower or brush their teeth. They just don't see the point, or they don't have the energy to do it, right? And when you're in that space, it's very, very easy to hold on to shame. And then that spiral just kind of makes things worse. So this is a good indicator that maybe they need some help, right? You need to reach out to them and say, how are you doing? How can I help, right? Of course, you want to do this kind and respectfully. You don't want to just come out and be like, you stink now or whatever. You want to be polite about it. But you know the person better than anybody else probably. And so you can tell if it's a neglect rather than just, them being busy or what have you. Those are signs of depression. And here go with that hopelessness again, right? They're expressing hopelessness. So they can say things like, I don't think I can go on anymore. It's too much for me, right? Those are indications that they're feeling a lot of despair. Loss of interest, lack of interest in the things that they once found enjoyable. I gave you some examples earlier. So really listen to what your loved one is saying to you, your child is saying to you, your spouse is saying to you, or even what are you saying to yourself, right? Sometimes suicidal outcries can be very, very subtle. They're not super direct. It could just be something like, I wish I could go to sleep and not wake up, right? That kind of thing. So be very mindful to pay attention to what they're saying and how they're saying it. And then isolation, avoidance of social interaction. So shout out to all my fellow introverts out there. I know that, socializing isn't really something that you do a lot. And so it's not necessarily a sign of being depressed or feeling suicidal. We're looking again for changes in behavior that's normal for that person. Okay. So if they're normally very social and they normally spend time with people, and now they're becoming more and more isolated and more withdrawn, okay, that's a sign. Now, if you're somebody who you can take it or leave it, this might not be a sign that there's depression or suicide going on. But you should always check just in case, right? Make sure everybody's doing good. Maybe they're having difficulty concentrating. Okay. Again, you can check these signs for your own behavior, right? Maybe you're having difficulty concentrating, right? Making decisions or remembering things. You just kind of have that brain fog, right? That's a sign that maybe, your mental health needs a little bit of a tune up, right? And again, physical health issues, right? Unexplained aches and pains. Now, we all get them, right? But sometimes there's physical symptoms that we experience that have no clear medical cause. So maybe we're getting chronic migraines, or we're getting a lot of back tension, right? Maybe we're injuring ourselves more with our backs because our muscles are so tight because we're so tense all the time, right? Um, that can be a sign that maybe you're in overdrive, right? That you need to take a break, that you need to stop and reassess and do some self-care. Or if your loved one just can't seem to not feel nauseous anymore, or they're always sleeping because they don't feel well, okay, that could be a sign that they need some help. So reach out to them. Substance abuse. So this is for children, teens, and adults alike. An increase of coping mechanisms like alcohol and drugs is pretty much something you need to keep an eye out for. It's a way that people can use to numb what they're feeling, deal with emotional pain. I'm not saying if you have a drink or something like that, that's a sign, but if you're doing it every day, you're doing it in increasing amounts. And that's what we call a maladaptive coping behavior. So it's not going to really fix anything, and it's not going to get you closer towards a goal where you can feel like you're investing into your well-being. It's just a band-aid, right? So just be mindful of that. And then, of course, the suicidal thoughts, right? Maybe they're telling you, hey, I'm suicidal. Okay, that's pretty obvious. But most people won't come right out and say that. They'll do more of those vague things that we mentioned earlier. But if they talk about feeling hopeless or having thoughts of suicide, we always take that seriously. I know when I used to do this training for children in the high school and the middle school, a lot of times they would assume, well, somebody threatens suicide, they're just trying to get attention. And we say, yeah, probably, but Why, right? What kind of attention are they trying to get? Are they trying to get attention saying, hey, I'm suicidal and I need help? Yeah, of course. That's what they're trying to do. But even if it's not, a thing that they're actually thinking they're going to go through with, that's a pretty intense claim to make. So it seems like they're trying to draw attention to something that needs to be addressed by either an adult or a mental health professional or something like that. So they should never be ignored regardless, whether they're actually going to commit suicide or not. It should be seen as a cry for help. Okay. So if you notice several of these signs persisting over time, that's when you need to approach your loved one with care and empathy. Okay. We can often feel a lot of fear in these spaces, right? We don't want somebody that we love to feel the way that they feel. And sometimes that fear can come out kind of aggressive, or sometimes it can come out even as angry, right? And so you want to make sure that if you are going to approach your loved one, try to take yourself out of the equation and just be a space for them, a soft space for them to land. Okay. So here's some steps that you can take to achieve that. So you can initiate the conversation, right? If you feel like somebody's depressed and they're sad or they're suicidal, don't wait for them to come and tell you, okay? Because that's probably not going to happen. That's why it's so important that we know the warning signs, right? Even if we never need to use them, if it comes up, we know what to do. So, of course, you want to have a private setting, right? You don't want to be putting everybody's business out on Front Street or where they're not going to be comfortable disclosing anything like that to you. And you make sure you just express your concern first, right? You can use I statements. That way you don't sound accusatory, like, I've noticed you've seemed different lately, or I'm worried for you, or something like that. Okay. And then, of course, listen non-judgmentally, right? We don't know what's going on in their head. We don't know how they're perceiving things. And so we can't make judgments on why they feel the way they feel or if they shouldn't feel the way that they feel, right? We just let them share their feelings. We don't judge them. We don't interrupt them, okay? Be patient, be empathetic, and acknowledge their emotions, right? Especially with our young ones. They need us to fill that cup so many times, right? And just letting them know, hey, what you feel is valid, right? But you're not alone. You're not having to go through this by yourself. And then offer support, right? Let them know that you're going to be there and that you're willing to help. And if you feel like they need some emotional or some professional support, like a therapist or a counselor, don't hesitate. Reach out, right? In fact, I would say even if you think it's an overkill, do it anyway, right? Because you never know. There may be things that they're not going to tell you that they'll tell a therapist, right? So always consider that as an option. So suggesting professional help, right? Especially if if you're talking to an adult, right? You can just recommend to them like, hey, there's professionals you can talk to, there's suicide crisis lines, things like that. But if it's a child, definitely let them know, hey, we're going to have to go and talk to somebody about this, right? And just use your best judgment in that space. And then stay connected. So we don't just want to have this one and done conversation with somebody, right? We want to come back. How are you doing? Checking in. Is there anything I can do for you? What kind of support can I offer you? Right? Just being consistent as that source of support and understanding that can mean a lot to somebody who's struggling mentally. So we also know that we are not substitutes for professional help, right? We can be friendly, we can be a parent, we can be a guardian, but seeking help from a mental health professional, they can provide guidance and assistance and let you kind of know what's your next step, right? How can we kind of untangle this knot that got you in this space where you felt so hopeless, right? So contact them. And of course, if you are feeling threatened, right? If somebody is saying they're suicidal and they have a weapon, um, you don't want to approach them and try to take anything from their hands. You just want to call emergency services, right? And if you feel like that they, even if you don't feel threatened, but you know that they're a threat to themselves, right? They actively have a plan, they actively have a weapon or a substance or something to overdose. You need to contact emergency services because it's a lot easier to be forgiven, right? For your friend, maybe, or somebody that you're close to not being happy with that decision. It's a lot easier to have a conversation about reconciliation than it is to attend their funeral, right? So it's worth it if you feel it's necessary to contact somebody. So what are some protective factors? Okay, protective factors are crucial, especially in the LGBTQ plus community, especially amongst the young people in that community. So going over some protective factors, I think is helpful because we know that the risk is there. We might not see the signs, right? They might not ever come, and they might be coming later. We don't know. But engaging in protective factors is never going to hurt anybody. Okay. So Affirming and accepting communities. Okay, that's a protective factor. So LGBTQ plus young people who reported living and accepting communities, they attempted suicide less than half the rate of those who reported living in very unaccepting communities. Okay, so that's just your everyday life, right? Walking through the world. If you feel targeted, if you feel as if you are going to be judged or rejected or hurt even, right? That's going to increase your risk of suicide. But if you have an accepting community, an affirming community, that's going to decrease it by half. Okay. More than half, so 54% of transgender and non-binary young people um, found that their school to be gender affirming, and those who did reported lower rates of attempting suicide. So, I mean, that's, more than half are experiencing something positive at school. So that's not anything to sneeze at, but that still leaves just about half that still need a little work, right? But again, that's a protective factor. Um, an ally and affirming adults and families. This is a big one, right? Because sometimes it doesn't matter necessarily. I mean, it does matter, but it's not as impactful what's going on outside of the home if what's going on inside the home is strong and affirming, right? So if you have social supports and acceptance from adults and peers, LGBTQ plus young people, if they have just at least one accepting adult in their life, report significantly lower rates of attempting suicide. Okay, so even if you're the only one, you're doing what you got to do, right? You're doing the best that you can. In 2021, a peer-reviewed study by the Trevor Project's research published in Transgender Health found that transgender and non-binary youth who reported gender identity acceptance from adults and peers had significantly lower odds of attempting suicide in the past year. Okay, so that community is very important. That accepting adult in their life is very, very important. And the same young people who felt high social support from their families reported attempting suicide at less than half the rate of those who've had low or moderate support. Okay. Um, and LGBTQ plus young people who live in a community that's accepting of them reported much lower rates as well. Okay. So the community definitely does matter. So that's why it's so important to get plugged in, right? That's why it's so important to be part of these communities. That's why we're trying to build these communities, right? So we have events, we have dances, we have social events, we have field trips, we have shows, we have art shows, right? We have all these things because we know that having community and being able to participate in the world where you don't have to hide who you are and you don't have to make excuses and you don't have to explain yourself, right? You can just be who you are. That is a protective factor. Okay, so taking your kid to a weird kids meetup or taking, you and your partner coming to one of the shows at Shenanigans, right? That's life-saving behavior, right? It might just seem like you're just going out and entertaining yourself, but again, we're communal creatures. Community is important to all of us, but especially in the very vulnerable, most vulnerable populations that surround us. Okay. So some resources, of course, 988, that's the one we all know. That's the suicide hotline nationwide, 24/7, and it is free. So if you need to talk to somebody, you can call 988. Okay, that is a suicide hotline. If you want to talk to somebody specifically that is trained with LGBTQ youth in mind, that are part of the community, you can contact the Trevor Project. Okay, their heart and soul is about suicide prevention in the youth of the LGBTQ youth. So you can text START to 678-678 to do a check or a text chat, right? So if you don't want to talk on the phone, that's fine. You can just text somebody. Or you can call. So that's 1-866-488-7386. Okay, so those are some good numbers to have on hand. Again, I hope you never need to use them, but you may. So it's good to have them just in case. And speaking just in case, I want to share with you a safety plan. So let me find my other document here. Here we go. So this is what a safety plan looks like. So whenever we have somebody who is expressing suicidal ideation, right? They've maybe been very direct with it, or maybe they've been more subtle, and we determine that they are at risk of suicide. we can create a safety plan. And really, a safety plan is just a toolbox. It's a resource. So, like, if you start to feel that maybe you need to reach out to somebody or you need to find some ways to cope, this is a way that you can kind of keep it all um, in one space. So, you don't have to think about it when you're in that high stress or high chaotic space, right? So, you want to do a safety plan when you're not feeling suicidal, okay? And it's okay to do it with somebody, okay? So, if you have somebody, if you're an adult and you're taking care of a young one, you can do this together. If you're concerned about your spouse or your partner, you can do it with them. If you want to do it for yourself, you can reach out to somebody that you know and trust that can help you with it. Okay. So it's okay to do it with a partner if you have to. So this here, the step one is to identify your warning signs, right? We went through those signs before, and it's like, are you not sleeping when you're usually okay sleeping, right? Or maybe you're eating more than you normally eat because it makes you feel better, right? So you know what your warning signs are, and so you can write those down. So that way you can kind of keep in mind, like, oh, I know when I'm feeling this way, I might want to course correct, right? The next one, what are your coping strategies, right? What kind of things do you do to get your mind back into a space where you can cope, right? Of course, we can do things that are not very healthy for us, right? We can pick up a glass of wine or we can pick up some beer or whatever. Or we can do things like engage in art, right? Or watch a fun movie or do something light, right? You're going to know what your coping strategies are. So you just jot those down. And then again, what are your distractions, right? So, what are some things that you can do to distract yourself? Maybe you could call a friend, right? Maybe you can go for a walk. Maybe you can go to the gym, right? Something like that. And then your supports. So who can you call, right? Who can you go to the gym with or do that walk with, right? That could be someone you love and know already. That could be maybe someone from a support group. That could be maybe a therapist or a counselor, or even that could just be the suicide lines, right? Reaching out is important. It doesn't really matter who, as long as you know it's somebody that you can trust, right? So write those that contact information down so you have it. And then your professional support. So your doctor, right? Your therapist, that kind of thing. And then a safe environment. So what makes you feel safe? Where can you go to where you feel comforted, right? Where you feel a way that you're being able to recharge, right? And make it a space that you can get to easily if possible, right? Of course, if your safe space is your bed and you're at work, you can't just run home and lay in the bed. But I would say if you're at work and you're feeling suicidal, you definitely should let somebody know and probably go to the emergency room. Okay. So this is just a very simple way to have that information on hand. So that way, when you are in a space that you need it, it's accessible and you don't have to worry about Googling anything or um, kind of, your brain kind of maybe isn't giving you the right information of like, well, what can you do to help yourself? You might just draw a blank. So this is a good way to have it ready. But again, you don't want to do that unless you're not feeling suicidal. And this might just be something that you do just in case, right? All right, so I'll stop my share. And I really appreciate you viewing this. I do these live, but I also record them and put them on YouTube. So I would love for you to take a gander at it, leave your comments. And that PDF of that safety plan, I'm going to actually add to the description and under here. So if you want to click on it, print it out, fill it out, it'll be easily accessible to you. So thank you again. I appreciate the time and the opportunity, and I'll see you next week.